Most of us have seen scary photos of crime scenes, deranged criminals, and natural disasters that often stay with us for some time afterward. But some creepy photos have scary backstories, showing us inexplicable objects in the background, or objects that behave in strange ways. Some of these photos have never been explained, and they remain unsolved mysterious cases. In September of 2021, 32-year-old primary school teacher Jonathan Lewis had just purchased a new house in Walton in the UK, and after picking up the keys, he was ready to move in and start making the house his own by doing some renovations. He knew that there was a spot under the stairs that offered a little more space that had been boarded up with plasterboard, so he decided to knock the wall down to fully utilize it. He noticed a wire coming out of the wall where the previous owners kept their fridge, but he couldn't tell where it was plugged into, so he decided to look for himself. He got his hammer and started knocking through the wall, but to his great surprise, he stumbled on something truly scary. A creepy photo that Jonathan took of the fist-sized hole shows a creepy rag doll sitting inside the wall. Taken aback, he started pulling away more of the plasterboard, and he realized that the doll was holding a note. The note started out with the words, "Thank you for freeing me. My name is Emily. My original owners lived in the house in 1961. I didn't like them, so they had to go." It went on to explain that the previous owners were always merry and singing, which annoyed the doll, so she ended their lives. The note ends with the words, "Hope you sleep well." Many of Jonathan's friends have urged him to put the house back up for sale immediately and to move away, but he seems far less perturbed by the mysterious case. He stated that he found the incident rather funny and doesn't intend to move out of the house anytime soon, as he's faced with either believing it was a prank or that haunted dolls are real, and he chooses to believe the former. He decided to leave the doll where he found it for a while so that people could come and see it, but he stated that he would eventually remove it when he renovates the kitchen. In 2013, 20-year-old Joseph Birch and 34-year-old Sotiris Charalambas were living together in Muswell Hill in London. One day, Joseph spotted a mirror that their landlord had thrown in a garbage bin and asked if he could take it for their apartment. The landlord said that he had no use for it and told Joseph that he could keep it. He took it back to the apartment and hung it on the wall, but before long he realized it was a decision that he lived to regret, as strange things started happening in the apartment. Both Joseph and Sotiris started seeing strange dark shadows and flickering lights in the mirror, and in one creepy photo, orbs of light can be seen reflected on its surface. The two men stated that the strange occurrences started after Sotiris painted the mirror's walnut frame a metallic silver color. Both men started having horrible nightmares, and on other occasions they'd be unable to fall asleep. On one occasion in particular, Joseph woke up covered in red scratch marks, and they both have woken up with sharp, stabbing pains throughout their bodies. The radiator immediately below the mirror also stopped working, despite there never being a problem before the mirror was put up. Soon the pipes in the apartment started rattling, and both men constantly felt drained, but felt better as soon as they left the property. Joseph also stated that items in the apartment, such as keys and phones, were constantly going missing, and one morning he heard a loud bang coming from the bathroom. When he went to investigate, he found the bathroom's contents thrown around the room, with a tub of shaving cream which had been placed on the other side of the room lying in the toilet. Sotiris works most days, meaning that Joseph is mostly alone in the property, and it's left him feeling uneasy and paranoid as he's constantly being watched. He has since decided to sell the mirror and listed it on eBay, where it sold for about $130. Joseph stated that he's never been a superstitious person, but since acquiring the mirror, he's felt sick to his stomach, and he preferred to sell the item to someone with knowledge of the paranormal, since he didn't want them to experience the same nasty surprise that he did. A creepy photo taken at the Mitten Brewing Company, located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, shows the bare footprints that the owner of the building claims belong to a ghost child. Chris Andrus and Max Cheerwheeler became the new owners of the building, which used to be an engine house, in February of 2012. When they met with the former owner, they jokingly asked if the place was haunted, to which the man replied, "Just know that it's nothing bad." They thought nothing more of it until 2 weeks later, when Chris arrived at the building to open up in the morning. He'd been mopping up before closing at 2 a.m. earlier that morning, and when he arrived, he noticed footprints in the lobby. He realized that no one had been there since he locked up and found it strange that the prints were of bare feet. When he walked back to the area, he made the startling discovery that they were small enough to be those of a child. Adding to the strange case, the prints didn't lead into the room, but rather started and ended in the middle of the floor. The prints also didn't have the logical pattern of someone walking, but were strangely random. In 2014, they decided to do renovations in the upstairs portion of the building, and when they tore down one of the original walls, they found yet another footprint. This one was also of a barefoot person, but it was white in color. They remembered the first prints that they'd found and decided to compare photos to the newly discovered print, and to their surprise, it was an exact match. They removed the wooden board where the print was found and placed it on the upstairs bar top as a historic piece, and it remains there to this day. But there have been other strange occurrences in the old building. Staff members have reported seeing shadows and silhouettes of strange figures throughout the building, and hearing noises from different rooms. Customers have also had creepy experiences, with one patron reporting that she felt the presence of an entity standing over her right shoulder. On several occasions, motion sensor lights near the bathrooms have been triggered, even when the brewery is closed and no one is around. Many people have speculated the activity is due to a firefighter who lost his life in the line of duty, but no one has found an explanation for the creepy footprints that appeared out of nowhere. On the 12th of December 2015, Sophie Killip and Kaylee Lomas were both 19 years old and were attending a Christmas party at Harry's Bar and Grill in Newcastle, England, when they discovered something in one of their photos that chilled them to the bone. The women took a photo of one of the long tables at the party to show how the decorations had been set up. They chose that specific table as there was no one sitting there at the time, and so they wouldn't be disturbed by the camera. About an hour later, they decided to look through the photos, and when they viewed the one taken at the table, they were horrified to discover that it showed what seems to be the ghost of a young girl sitting at the table. The girl seems to have long dark hair and sunken eyes that are staring directly into the camera with a sinister expression on her face. She also is seemingly wearing old-fashioned clothing and seems to have a few cuts to her head. Both women were convinced that the table was unoccupied at the time the photo was taken, and their discovery left them feeling creeped out. They were surprised to find that the girl's features were readily visible, and Sophie stated that she never believed in ghosts up to that point. But after taking the photo and making the mysterious discovery, she believes that there are definitely paranormal occurrences out there. But some people aren't so quick to jump to the same conclusions. Some have stated that it may be a trick of the light, such as a reflection, while others theorize that it may be a case of facial pareidolia, where the brain tricks us into thinking that we see a human face rather than an everyday object. Some people have also theorized that the girl is merely the blank space between two objects, and that it incidentally looks like a human figure. Both Sophie and Kaylee are adamant that there is a ghost and that it's been caught on camera. A Reddit user who goes by the name Kid Cutter uploaded a creepy photo that they took while visiting a museum in Paris, France. The post was made to the popular website with the title "Ghost of Paris Museum. Can anyone please explain what I saw today?" with a link to an image of the photo with an explanation. In the photo, which was taken at a local museum, a painting titled "A Victim of Society" that was created by the German artist George Cross can be seen. At first, it doesn't seem to show anything out of the ordinary, but upon closer inspection, it takes on a more sinister appearance. In the bottom left corner of the painting, a strange green-hued face can be seen, seemingly looking directly into the camera with a puzzled expression. The poster explains that he was visiting the museum with his girlfriend when she decided to take the photo of the painting. He adds that they were the only two people present in the room at the time, but when she looked into the camera's viewfinder after taking the scary photo, she noticed the bizarre reflection, and although Kid Cutter states that he doesn't believe in ghosts, he ran out of the room very quickly. He explained that they'd viewed the painting just minutes earlier and walked away, but his girlfriend had a strange feeling that she should take a photo of it. He states that he was facing away from the painting as the picture was taken, and he's certain that the room was empty. Other users on Reddit were quick to point out that the ghostly image closely resembles the face of George Gross, who created the painting, and that there were no similar images of the German artist to be found online, further adding to the mystery of the photo. Some commenters have speculated that it may just be a coincidental reflection from other objects in the room, while others think it may be a trick that the museum is playing on its patrons. Others have also brought up the facial pareidolia phenomenon and believe it could be a case of seeing what you want to see. But many have stated that the likeness is just too uncanny, and they believe that the photo really does show the reflection of the artist in his own painting. The Ship Inn in Wolveston is a popular local pub with a lengthy historical past. It's unclear exactly why the pub was built, but it served as a town hotspot for several years before it was rebuilt in the 19th century, after which it continued to thrive as a business that is beneficial to the economy of the small village. Since information about the pub's past is scarce, it's unfair to assume that this was the location of any tragedies that may have led to a serious haunting. But regardless, employees, customers, and local residents claim the pub as a source of paranormal activity. The owner, Nikki Waters, shared with news sites that she believes the rumors and has experienced ghostly encounters firsthand. Some of her employees were so afraid of the spirits that they refused to go into the cellar room. Many cases of alleged encounters have been reported by employees, ranging from cold spots to full-on poltergeist activity. If these claims aren't enough to convince the average person, maybe this video from June of 2019 will help. The video, captured by a CCTV security camera, shows the bar late one night, hours after the bar had closed. A half-full drinking glass sits on the bar top near the edge. A few seconds pass by without much activity, but all of a sudden the glass flies off the table to the ground as if it were being thrown by an unseen force. When Nikki Waters came to work the following morning, she noticed the glass on the floor, shattered into pieces. She asked a few employees if they had any idea what had happened, but no one seemed to know. Curious and baffled, she reviewed the CCTV footage from the night before and witnessed what actually happened. She investigated a little more to find that the barmaid cleaned the bar top but accidentally left that one glass behind. When the glass flew off the bar top, no one was present inside the pub. It was closed and all of the employees had left hours before. Nikki uploaded the video to Facebook, offering a brief explanation of the footage. Of course, opinions were split. Those that believe in the paranormal insisted that they could tell Nikki had a poltergeist haunting on her hands. Only a powerful spirit would be able to move an object with such force, though. For now, not much has been done to combat the spirit. Thankfully, most of its activity following the incident has been harmless. When you hear the term poltergeist, you may think back to the popular horror film, or you may imagine a scene in which furniture or weapons are being thrown around a room. However, poltergeist activity doesn't usually start out that way. In some cases, it escalates to a dangerous point. That doesn't mean that the more calm events linked to a poltergeist aren't terrifying, though. Everyone can agree that an unwelcomed ghostly presence in your home is enough to make you uncomfortable. In this case, someone was disturbed by a spirit while relaxing in their room. Luckily, he was able to capture footage of the strange event, and he set up a camera inside of the room facing the door and another one facing the closet door. The video, uploaded in March of 2019, is about 4 minutes long. Most of it is uneventful, but it was necessary to keep the camera rolling to avoid missing the action. Around the 1 minute and 50-second mark, the bedroom doorknob suddenly moves and the door swings open slowly. For a short period, it gently sways back and forth as if it's being pushed by an unknown force. It's unlikely that this was just the wind, because not only would it be impossible for the wind to turn a doorknob, but it also couldn't have swung it open or closed it in a much more dramatic manner. The rest of the video, the resident inspects the doorknob and lock, proving the activity is not due to a janky doorway or knob. To add another layer to the mystery, according to the resident, this haunting apparently began after another strange and disturbing event. In the description of the video, while we don't really know what he's referring to, the uploader makes a mention of a previous encounter in the woods, and it's easy to assume that he stumbled across a haunted, cursed, or generally strange area, and whatever spirit was present followed him home. The gentle opening and closing of a door is a harmless threat. However, if this spirit grows in strength, this man may have a much more dangerous situation on his hands. Tom O'Flynn from Tolleson Service Station in Mayfield apparently caught paranormal evidence on his CCTV cameras in September of 2019. Tom walked into work one Wednesday morning, ready to open his shop for the day. Upon a brief inspection of the store, though, he came across an absolute mess. He reported that he found various food items on the floor, and he noticed that a large fruit bowl had been thrown onto the ground. The station had recently passed a rodent inspection, so he assumed that this wasn't the work of hungry rats. Furthermore, he noticed that none of the items had been eaten or opened, just knocked down. He decided to review the CCTV footage from the night before, and in the video, which includes various camera angles and was edited for easier viewing, it shows a few small items suddenly flying off the shelves as if being thrown. Around 10 minutes later, the large fruit bowl is seen flying to the ground as if it was hit with a great force. The video unfortunately doesn't show much else. An apparition doesn't appear, but still, Tom was terrified when he reviewed the content. It was clear that this was not the work of rodents, intruders, or even a strong breeze. One theory that was suggested implied that merchandise was being stocked too tightly and later fell due to the pressure. While this could be the case for the treats that fell off the shelf, it doesn't come close to an explanation for the fruit bowl, which was on a clear surface away from other items. Tom believes that he's captured visual proof of a poltergeist haunting and plans to get paranormal investigators involved. Tom explained that the store had never experienced paranormal activity before. However, the service station is located between two funeral homes, which gives it an eerie feeling and, for believers, could be the source of the spirit. It's important for Tom to stay vigilant if an angry spirit already has enough power to throw such things in a violent way. There's no telling what negative energy will be directed at the person in the store. While some people love to dive headfirst into a paranormal situation, the average person reacts on instinct when coming face to face with a ghostly presence by running in the opposite direction. There's no shame in fleeing the scene to protect yourself, which is exactly what this store employee did. Perhaps a retelling of this story would have been scary enough on its own. However, video footage that actually shows the events unfolding is even better. This video was captured by a CCTV security camera. It's unclear who later collected and shared the video, so there's no background information available. The footage begins with a shop worker casually peeking around the aisles. Perhaps something happened prior to this footage that concerned him, causing him to inspect the store. Suddenly, after the worker turns around a corner, an item mysteriously falls off the shelf. Instantly, the employee decides he's not facing whatever just happened, so he runs away at full speed. You may be thinking that he overreacted and the falling item could have been due to tight stocking of the shelves, but keep in mind that we're missing necessary information about this event. There could be a solid reason why the employee fled the scene. As far as the argument that the item fell off due to tight stocking, the video doesn't end when the worker rushes off. A few minutes after his exit, more items are randomly flying off the shelves and being kicked around after their landing. A freezer door is flung open and held in a position for a short while, then slammed shut. This continues for a significant amount of time. In this video, it only seems like a few seconds, but the footage has been sped up for easier viewing. It's possible that this went on for 30 minutes or more. Unfortunately, we don't know much about the shop. It could have a history of paranormal activity, which would make the employee's swift departure much more understandable. Or this could have been the first time anything happened and the employee acted out of instinct. Either way, many agree that this video shows compelling evidence of poltergeist activity. It's usually agreed that regular spirits don't have the power to move objects, especially in a violent way. The power is more common with poltergeist, and it's believed that poltergeists are often evil spirits that aim to harm or torment their victims. Thankfully, in this case, no one was harmed. Again, it's important to note that a poltergeist haunting should be addressed immediately to avoid the spirit growing stronger or more violent. This video, from February of 2019, apparently shows a group of paranormal investigators being chased out of an infamous psychiatric hospital by ghosts, or so they claim. A group of investigators made a trip to Eloise Asylum in Westland, Michigan, to enter an abandoned, run-down building after learning the area was allegedly extremely haunted. They entered the old building in hopes of documenting paranormal evidence, which in some way they actually captured. Todd Bonner, co-founder of the group, known as Detroit Paranormal Expeditions, explained that they'd heard rumors of paranormal activity in the eerie location, and that this footage is not the first time the team fled the building. However, this video is more convincing, as in the video, the team is exploring the building when they turn down a dark hallway that looks like it's straight out of a horror film. As they continue forward, they suddenly hear a loud crash behind them. The team reacts and screams as they direct their attention to the area the noise came from. One of them says, "Alright, we're leaving," to whoever may be listening. They turn toward the exit and see that a vinyl record had been thrown to the ground and broken. They assume that this was the cause of the noise, and they rush out of the building, as though they were being kicked out. While you may not find this evidence convincing, countless horror stories have been spread by witnesses that explore the same building. So what's more likely, that every single visitor would lie, or that the former asylum is filled with poltergeist spirits? Most believers agree with the latter. On January 17, 1949, the star Aiel took off from the island of Bermuda, headed for the island of Jamaica, and on board were 7 crew members and 13 passengers, all excited about touching down in Jamaica to either start their holiday, return home, or see loved ones. But sadly, they would never get this chance. An hour into the journey, the pilot made a radio signal to the command center with his position and location as is standard for pilots. After this transmission, the airplane and its passengers were never seen or heard from again. The plane was cruising at about 18,000 feet when it mysteriously vanished. When the flight didn't make contact and never touched down in Jamaica, everyone became worried but theorized that perhaps they'd made an emergency landing and would show up soon. An official investigation showed that search and rescue teams weren't sent out until 7.5 hours after the flight's last contact, leaving little hope of finding any survivors. Search parties were left scratching their heads as there was no evidence of a plane crash, no wreckage, no debris, and no bodies. So where had the plane gone? It's believed that after 7.5 hours, the wreckage would have sunk to the floor of the ocean, but to this day, nothing has ever been found, even by divers. Experts have theorized that the design of the plane, coupled with the fact that air travel was in its infancy at the time, was to blame. Don McIntosh, a former BSAA pilot, commented that he thought the cabin heater was responsible for the plane's downfall. He says, "My theory is that hydraulic vapor escaped from a leak, which got into the hot heater and caused an explosion. If the heater had caught fire down below the floorboards, then it could have developed a catastrophic state before the crew knew anything about it." Irving Rivers was an experienced pilot who, on November 3, 1978, set out for a solo flight from St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands to St. Thomas, also located in the Virgin Islands. The distance between the two islands is about 42 miles, with Rivers being an experienced pilot, and there were no concerns for safety. On that November day, the sun was shining and it was a balmy 80 degrees, with good visibility and good winds, the perfect day for a flight. Rivers set from St. Croix, alone in hopes of picking up passengers in St. Thomas, but sadly, those passengers were never able to board the Piper Navajo plane, chartered by Eastern Caribbean Airways. During the flight, air traffic control alerted Rivers to a small rain shower up ahead, and told him to prepare the plane for any necessary adjustments. Rivers radioed back acknowledging this, and told the crew that the plane was ready and prepared for rain. Just kilometers from the landing strip, air traffic control radioed that he was clear for landing. They saw Piper's Navajo red and green flashing lights as it approached the runway. But the plane never touched ground. Soon, the lights from the plane could not be seen at all, and it had disappeared from the radar completely. Search and rescue teams frantically scrambled to find the missing aircraft and recover the pilot, only there was no evidence of the aircraft ever found. Despite the fact that Rivers was last seen just 1.61 kilometers from the landing strip, he was never seen again. On February 16, 1918, the USS Cyclops set sail from Rio de Janeiro, headed for Baltimore, Maryland, carrying 8,100 tons of manganese ore, which was 100 tons over its maximum capacity. 4 days later, the ship landed in Salvador before setting off again for its final destination of Maryland. The USS Cyclops had been making successful journeys since 1910 and carried a crew of over 306 people. Its main operations were the transportation of coal as well as helping refugees flee dangerous lands. It wasn't until 1917 that the ship was utilized in the First World War. The last known message from the ship was "Weather fair, all well." Since that fateful message, the USS Cyclops was never heard from or seen again. There wasn't even so much as an SOS call to nearby vessels. Around the time that the last message was sent, a violent storm ripped through all of the area, leading many to think that the Cyclops succumbed to the elements. A commander aboard the ship had even made a report that there was a cracked cylinder and that the ship was in no fit state to carry out its mission. High Command said that the ship could finish its delivery to the United States. However, sadly, they never made it. Many believe that a combination of a cracked cylinder, overloading the boat with manganese ore, and bad weather sealed the fate of the USS Cyclops. The Santa Fe magazine published an article just a few years after the ship had disappeared that quotes, "Usually a wooden bucket or a cork life preserver identified as belonging to a lost ship is picked up after a wreck, but not so with the USS Cyclops. She just disappeared as though some gigantic monster of the sea had grabbed her, men and all, and sent her into the depths of the ocean, and the suddenness of her destruction is amplified by the absence of any wireless calls for help being picked up by any of the ships along the route." Despite an extensive naval search over the past 100 years, the truth about what happened to the USS Cyclops will remain as mysterious as its sudden disappearance. Dan Burak was an ardent yachtsman and loved nothing more than sailing out off the coast of Miami in his 23-foot luxury yacht. On the 22nd of December 1967, Dan was accompanied by his father, Patrick Hogan, as they planned to have a beautiful holiday just off the coast of Miami and spend the Christmas period together. Just hours after the pair had set off their breakaway, the yacht Dan named Witchcraft encountered issues just a mile away from the Miami marina. Dan wasn't initially worried as he was close to the marina and was also not aware of any impending or immediate threats to the yacht. Nevertheless, he made a call to the RCC alerting them that the Witchcraft was experiencing a few issues, but it was not an emergency. Due to the calm nature of Dan, the RCC didn't respond with much urgency, as he seemed to have everything under control. The call was placed at around 9 p.m. Just 19 minutes later, at 9:19 p.m., the RCC arrived at where the call had been placed by Dan, only to find that the Witchcraft was nowhere in sight. The model of yacht that Dan owned was known to be practically unsinkable, but still there was no one in sight. There wasn't even any evidence that the yacht had been there just 19 minutes prior, so where was the yacht? Over 24,500 square miles were searched by the Coast Guard and other volunteers to no avail. The Witchcraft was nowhere to be found, leaving it to become yet another Bermuda Triangle mystery for the history books. 14-year-old friends Austin Stefanos and Perry Cohen set out on July 24, 2015 for a fun day of fishing and hanging out. Austin owned a 19-foot fishing boat, and with the hot sun of Jupiter, Florida beaming down on them, it was the perfect day to go out. Both Austin and Perry were experienced in boating, so their parents had no concerns over their safety. While the pair were only young, they'd been driving boats since they were 10 years old and had made many trips like this before. The last time their parents had heard from them was when Austin sent a text at 11:25 a.m. telling them that Perry's phone had broken but all was okay. The last known sighting of the pair came at 2 p.m. when the 19-foot single-engine boat carrying the two boys is seen leaving the Jupiter Inlet, something that the boys knew they weren't allowed to do. The boat had around $100 worth of fuel in the tank, and both boys knew how to repair boats should anything go wrong. By 4 p.m., a storm had rolled into the Jupiter Inlet, and family members were worried that the boys hadn't returned home yet. Austin wasn't answering his phone, and Perry's was broken, so neither family had any way of getting into contact with them. The last activity that we know of was on Austin's cell phone, and it was a Snapchat taken at some point during the trip, showing the storm rolling in with the caption, "We're effed." 2 days after their disappearance, their boat is spotted 65 miles offshore, with life jackets and the cooler missing. The boat was not recovered and left to carry on floating out to sea. A pilot said that he even saw one of the teenagers floating on debris, but didn't signal for their rescue. It wasn't until March of 2016 that the boat was seen capsized off the east coast of Bermuda, with no engine cover, no life jackets, and no cooler as mentioned before. It took another month before the US Coast Guard recovered the boat and Austin's phone. There were a range of theories. One of these is that the boys voluntarily ran away to the Bahamas, and this theory was supported by an Instagram message from Perry to another friend saying, "Me and Austin are crossing to the Bahamas tomorrow. Come with us, we wouldn't check in." This theory has been mainly debunked, as neither of the boys had their passports and only had $100 in cash, which they used to fill up the tank. It seems the boys were experienced boaters, so they likely knew that they'd find it difficult to make it that far with 40 gallons of fuel in one engine. The prevailing theory is that the boys encountered trouble while out at sea, and due to them not having a radio on board, they were unable to signal for help. Austin's stepfather theorized that the boys were kidnapped and taken from the boat. However, without bodies, it's unlikely we'll ever know the truth. Ruth Dorsey was 67 years old when she vanished in August of 1974. Ruth had been a widow for 9 years when she disappeared. She lived alone on a 350-acre farm. Her nearest neighbor was more than a mile away. Though she lived in an isolated location, she had a relatively active life. She was very close to her nieces and nephews and would go out of her way to help friends and family members. After her husband died, Ruth had taken a job at the local bank, which kept her mind active. She also played the organ at the local church and taught at the Sunday school there. It was the church that first realized Ruth was missing. When she didn't show up, they contacted police and asked for someone to check in on her. They found the front door to Ruth's home wide open and the car missing. Ruth wasn't home, but her 3 dogs were found cowering in the bathroom. Later that day, her car was found outside the duplex where she and her husband first lived together. It seems the building was abandoned, but the front door was left open when they arrived. Authorities said there was no evidence that Ruth had gone inside. Inside the car, police found that the keys were still in the ignition. Ruth's glasses and purse were on the front seat. Investigators found that Ruth hadn't been seen since the day before. The Saturday had been a pretty busy day. Ruth had spent the morning doing chores, including baking for her neighbors, and arranged a vet appointment for one of the dogs. That afternoon, she had a call with an unidentified relative and went to a gas station where she told the attendant she was going to pick up her next of kin. At 6 p.m., a neighbor saw her turn into her driveway. Ruth's home was obscured from view, so the neighbor didn't see Ruth go inside. It's not clear if the neighbor was able to tell whether or not Ruth was alone. What happened to Ruth after this remains a mystery. Some have suggested she may have suffered from dementia and gotten confused before losing her life in an accident. Others believe she may have taken her own life due to loneliness or fallen victim to foul play. No sign of Ruth or her remains have ever been found. At 5:30 p.m. on December 18, 2011, East St. Louis police responded to a call about a car that had been abandoned in the middle of the road. The Chevy Trailblazer still had its engine running, and personal belongings, presumably belonging to the car's owner, had been left inside. But the driver was nowhere to be seen. The car was impounded and taken away. It wasn't until a few weeks later that the parents of the owner, Phoenix Colden, would be told about the car as they searched for their missing daughter. It was only a few hours before the car was discovered that Phoenix had last been seen by her parents. Her mother saw her sitting outside in her car, where she would often go to take phone calls. At 2:20 p.m., her father watched her leave for the last time. Phoenix was described as quiet, well-read, and deeply religious. Earlier that morning, she'd gone to church. She also wanted to fit in wherever she went, and her parents feared this might have led her to getting involved with the wrong crowd. Phoenix was going through a lot of changes in her life around the time that she disappeared. Her parents would discover this after she vanished. A few years earlier, she'd moved out of her parents' home for the first time and told them she was living with a female friend. It would later emerge that she'd been living in an apartment with a boyfriend named Michael. Her friends knew about Michael, but later said Phoenix asked them not to tell her parents, as they wouldn't approve of them living together while only dating. Early in 2011, something in the relationship changed, and Phoenix moved back in with her parents. It's not clear if she and Michael were still dating, but they did still talk on the phone. The day before Phoenix vanished, she'd spent an hour and a half on the phone with Michael. When asked about what they spoke about, Michael claimed he couldn't remember. Police have said Michael isn't a suspect, but her parents believe he introduced her to shady characters who might be responsible for her disappearance. It also later emerged Phoenix hadn't signed up for classes in the fall. Her parents fear she may have become the victim of trafficking, and there have been a number of sightings of her across the country, which have been investigated by a private investigator. Others suggest she ran away herself, and there's been unconfirmed sightings that say she's living as a soccer mom in Iowa, though her parents dispute this theory. It was 9:45 a.m. on August 4th, 1981, when a woman visiting the shopping center on Manhattan Boulevard looked through a window of a law office to check the time on the clock that hung on the wall. Beneath the clock sat Cindy Anderson at the desk where she worked as a secretary. She was alone at the time. The lawyers that she worked for were all at court that morning. This was the last time anyone saw Cindy. Her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Cindy was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was straight-laced, according to those that knew her, and came from a relatively devout Christian fundamentalist family. She was looking forward to classes at William Tyndale Bible College in Detroit at the end of the summer. Cindy would be attending alongside her boyfriend, Jeff Lemke, the man she believed she would marry one day. From the outside, it looked like there was nothing out of the ordinary going on in Cindy's life, but even clients at the law firm knew there was more going on than meets the eye. Cindy had been receiving strange phone calls for months leading up to her disappearance. The calls came through at work and appeared to terrify Cindy, though nobody ever heard who was on the other end of the line. One client, who came in to pay his legal bill the day before Cindy disappeared, reported seeing her cheerfully answer the phone, only to quickly slam the receiver back down. The phone began to ring again a few moments later, and Cindy answered the phone again, more nervous this time. It appeared to be the same person, and Cindy slammed the phone down again. The client was so concerned about how scared Cindy seemed that he called the police and asked them to check on her. Cindy had also been having strange dreams alongside the phone calls. In them, a man she knew would force her out of her home and into his car before taking her life. Her parents tried to convince her that they were just dreams, but Cindy couldn't shake the feeling that they were related to a stalker. The strange occurrences accumulated into her disappearance on August 4th. 15 minutes after she was last seen by a passing shopper, her mother tried to call her on her work phone. Cindy didn't pick up. Her mother assumed that she was talking to a client on the other line, but it would soon turn out nobody had been able to get through to the office. When lawyers eventually arrived at the office at noon, they found nothing out of place. Phone messages had been neatly left for them at their desks. The air conditioner had already been switched on. Cindy's car was still parked outside, and the only thing wrong was Cindy was nowhere to be seen, and her car keys and purse were also missing. Police and Cindy's family believe foul play was involved. Who would have taken her and why is the subject of countless theories, including one suggesting one of the lawyers had something to do with her disappearance, though there's no evidence to connect any of these theories. How Cindy could have been taken is also a mystery. None of the phones were left on hold, as Cindy would normally do when she was to leave the office, so it seemed unlikely she'd stepped out to grab lunch and had been taken on the way to her car. However, there was also no sign of a break-in, and Cindy kept the door locked due to her concerns over the stalker. Cindy's friends and family are still hopeful answers may one day come, but the case has been cold for decades. Ronald Tamon was a sophomore at Miami University in Ohio when he vanished into thin air on April 19, 1953. Ron was a relatively well-liked student. He was smart and could often be found helping out his classmates with homework. He played string bass in the school jazz band, which he adored, and was a member of the wrestling team, as well as part of a fraternity. The weekend Ron disappeared, nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. The Friday before he disappeared, Ron paid the insurance on his car, a 1929 Chevy. He was one of the few students allowed to bring their car on campus. The following day, he attended a handful of classes and played with the band at a fundraiser for the Honor Society. He also hung out with his brother, who was a freshman at the same university. Nobody noticed anything out of the ordinary that evening, and much of the Sunday followed in the same manner. There were no classes to attend, but a number of Ron's fellow students spotted him around campus, eating in the dining hall and heading towards the shower and studying in his room. At around 7 p.m., he visited Richard Titus, a close friend who lived down the hall from Ron's own dorm room. The two often played jokes on one another, and not long earlier, Ron had short-sheeted Richard's bed. Ron helped Richard out with his homework before returning to his own dorm room, saying he needed to finish his own homework. There, he would find Richard had put a fish from the pond outside his bed. At 8 p.m., he went down to retrieve fresh sheets from the hall manager and returned to his room. This was the last time anyone would see him. Ron's dorm mate came home about 90 minutes later, having spent the weekend away from the university. He found the door to Ron's room open, and Ron's textbooks were out. His wallet and keys were still in the room, and his car was still outside, but Ron was nowhere to be found. When Ron hadn't returned home the next day, his dorm mate reported him missing. A search of the local area got underway, with 400 students volunteering to help look for him. The only clues that were ever found was a sighting reported by a woman a few weeks later. She told police someone matching Ron's description had knocked on her door just after midnight on April 20th. He seemed dazed and confused and asked for directions to the nearest bus stop. The woman lived in 7 Mile, a village some 10 miles away from the university campus. Over the years, there have been countless theories about what happened to Ron that night. Many have concluded someone took Ron's life, and there are numerous ghost sightings at the university that have been blamed on Ron. When the building that had once housed his dorm was demolished, the rubble was searched for his remains, but nothing turned up. Some have suggested he survived and has been living undercover. Others have made connections to CIA experiments going on at the time. When Hannah Upp disappeared on her way to school, where she worked in September of 2017, it was the 3rd time in 9 years that she'd vanished without warning. This time, though, she wouldn't reappear a few weeks later. Hannah is still missing, and no trace of her has ever been found. Hannah suffered from a rare form of amnesia, which effectively made her temporarily forget who she was. The condition has been nicknamed the James Bourne syndrome, named after the main character of the Bourne series. However, Hannah wasn't some spy. She was a school teacher working with elementary school children. The first time she disappeared was August of 2008. She was living in New York City and had left her apartment to go on a jog. It was a few days before anyone realized she was missing. She told friends she was going to visit her mother for the weekend, and it was only when she hadn't returned home by that Monday that they grew concerned. 20 days after she was last seen, 2 ferry walkers hoisted her out of the water south of Manhattan. They found Hannah lying face down in the water, wearing only her running shorts and sports bra. Thankfully, she was still alive, though she was suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and had sunburns on her back. While she was in the hospital, she revealed the last thing she remembered was leaving the house to go for a jog, and she was eventually diagnosed with a condition that's usually triggered by trauma or an internal conflict. As far as anyone knew, Hannah hadn't suffered any such trauma, and the reason why she developed the condition is unknown. For the next 5 years, Hannah lived a relatively normal life. She went back to work as a teacher, eventually moving to Maryland, where she worked as an assistant teacher. Only a few weeks after she started working there, she disappeared again. She was reported missing when she failed to show up for work. This time, it was only a few days before she remembered who she was, and she borrowed a phone from a stranger to contact her mother and brought herself back to her old life. A year later, Hannah moved to St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands to work as a teacher at an elementary school there. She had a happy life there for 2 years. She made new friends and enjoyed her work as a teacher as well as an island life. But in the summer of 2017, she started acting strange. She confided with a friend that she struggled in the fall and started behaving strangely. Her friend didn't pry into what struggles Hannah was dealing with, but as her 2 earlier disappearances had happened in late August and early September, it's possible there was an event that was troubling Hannah. On September 6th, Hurricane Irma hit the island. Hannah survived the hurricane, but there was another on the horizon. She was one of a number of volunteers who set about prepping the school for the next hurricane, which was due to hit in about a week's time. On September 14th, she told her housemates she was going to the school to help out and left in her car. It was the last time anyone would ever see her. The following day, her car keys were found on the beach beside her neatly folded clothes. A search party immediately set out to try to find her, but the second hurricane hit before any progress could be made. The group tried to reorganize again after the natural disaster, but any evidence had already been washed away. Cindy Lee Melon left the department store where she worked in Ventura, California, just after closing time on January 20th, 1970, only to discover that her car had a flat tire. Cindy wasn't the type of person who would have been able to solve this issue by herself, so she was likely extremely grateful when a tall, slim man in his late 30s arrived to help her. At around 10:30 p.m., two co-workers left the store and saw Cindy with this man at her car. The man was putting the car on a jack. They didn't recognize him, but guessed it was Cindy's father. The two co-workers went to get coffee, and when they came back 30 minutes later, both Cindy and the man were gone. Her car was still there on its jack, with the flat tire still in place. It didn't strike them as odd, as it was late and dark, and it made sense that Cindy and her father had gone home to deal with the problem in the morning. But Cindy hadn't gone home, and she would never be seen again. Cindy's father realized she was a missing person when he woke up the next morning to find she hadn't come home. He hadn't been the mysterious individual helping her that night before, and hadn't realized anything was wrong. But when he found both Cindy and her car missing, he went to her place of work to see if he could get any answers. He found the scene exactly as Cindy's coworkers had seen it the night before. The spare tire was still on the ground next to Cindy's car, waiting to be put on. All the doors, the trunk, and the glove compartment were open. The police were called, and immediately foul play was suspected. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. The Good Samaritan ruse, where a creepy individual pretends to help a stranded person before kidnapping them or causing them harm, is responsible for a number of strange missing person cases, especially cases involving young women. That seems to be the most likely theory here, but the Good Samaritan in question seems to have manufactured the entire event. Cindy's father found her flat tire had actually been cut with a bladed weapon on the side. It's likely whoever was responsible for this was responsible for Cindy's disappearance. There have been a few potential suspects over the years, including a man who worked at the time laying down pipes at the side of the highway. But nobody was ever arrested, and the strange case remains unsolved. Both Cindy's parents have passed away, and it's likely the missing person case will only be solved if the individual comes forward. Bobby Nighthawk Horn was once one of the biggest radio personalities in Washington, D.C. In the 1960s and 70s, he was hugely influential in highlighting R&B music. Radio stations where he worked transitioned from rock and roll to R&B and soul music, and in 1977, he was working on setting up his own production company. He also is believed to have had ties with the mob. It was August 31st, 1977, when Bobby was last seen. He left a party in the District Heights area in his blue 1976 old Tornado and hasn't been seen since. He was reported missing after he failed to pick up his son from the airport, and an investigation began. Immediately, Bobby's connection to a concert that took place on the 4th of July was a point of interest. The concert had been co-produced by Bobby's production company, along with associates from the Genovese clan. It was planned to take place at the Take It Easy Ranch in Eastern Shores of Maryland. Shortly before the concert, Bobby allegedly had two thugs sell counterfeit tickets to the concert, doubling the number of people who would be in attendance. 2 days before it was supposed to start, both were found in the woods behind the ranch, having passed away due to bullets. The concert went ahead, and Bobby and the mob associates got into a disagreement with how many people were there. Bobby claimed there were only 100,000 people, while the mob believed there had been twice as many, which would have earned them about $1 million. So when Bobby disappeared, investigators believed the worst. He was also accused of several years of tax evasion and was due to show up in court for an arraignment, But investigators didn't believe that would happen, especially when his car was found. The car was found in a rural area of North Carolina. It was burned out, and there was no trace of Bobby anywhere. At this point, police began working under the assumption that Bobby was no longer alive, though his body was never found. Other associates with the concert also had their lives claimed by the mob in the following years due to the money they lost. If Bobby was another victim, he would be one of the only ones whose body had never been found. It's also possible he made his escape, given that he had the money to do so, but for now his fate remains a mystery. When students and teachers at Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick, learned that Chris Metallic was a missing person, they all thought he would be found relatively quickly. Now, more than 9 years after he disappeared, there's still no sign of the missing student. Chris was 20 years old in November of 2012. He was 6 feet tall, loved basketball, and was described as the peacemaker of his friendship group. On the night of November 24th, he was at a house party in downtown Sackville. He'd been drinking like most of the guests, and at about 1:30 a.m., he left the house to head home. He wasn't wearing any shoes, and a friend came across him and guided him back to the house and gave him a pair of flip-flops to borrow for the journey home. It was the last time anybody that knew Chris would ever see him. The walk home should have taken 20 minutes, but Chris never made it back. The following morning, Chris was reported missing. That's when police realized a strange individual reported walking on the side of a rural road at 5:30 a.m. matched Chris's description. The person was reported walking along a nearby road by a man on his way to work. The man thought that it was odd that anybody would be walking at that time in the morning. The exact location of the sighting hasn't been found, but police revealed that they were increasing their search to include Route 940, and the junction between those two roads was about an hour's walk from the house party. It was also very close to the Tentrama River. A few days after Chris's disappearance, the flip-flops he was wearing were found at the side of the road, along with footsteps later confirmed to be Chris's, and they led to the river. A search of the river took place, but no evidence was ever found, and the case remains a strange, unsolved mystery. There are too many unanswered questions related to this case. It's not clear why Chris left the party in the first place, why he didn't bother to get his shoes, and why they weren't given to him when he walked back to the house. Even drunk, Chris should have been able to make his way home, and after 4 hours of walking in the cold, it's likely he would have sobered up enough if he had gotten lost. It's possible he was suffering from hypothermia, which could have caused him to behave strangely, but that still leaves strange mysteries unexplained. At the time of his disappearance, Chris Metallic was described as Aboriginal, 6 feet tall, and weighing about 180 pounds, with dark hair and glasses. Anyone with information that could answer this unsolved case should contact the Sackville RCMP at 506-364-5023. Miguel Oles disappeared without explanation more than 15 years ago from outside of a strip club in Portland, Maine. He lived in Hyde Park, Massachusetts with his mother and younger brother. He was very close with his family, including his 2 children, and would call his mother every day, which was why it was so surprising for her to find out that he'd made a trip to Portland only when he arrived. Miguel was unemployed and had very little money, but had made the trip to Portland many times with his on and off again girlfriend, or to go see her. At the end of August 2006, they were off again, but they remained friends, and on August 31st, she sent him money to come and see her. According to reports, he was reluctant to go, but eventually agreed and went to Portland with no luggage and no phone. When he arrived, he called his mother to let her know he was okay and that he loved her. Nothing seemed to be off, even with the sudden trip. He wouldn't call her again throughout the 3-day trip. On September 3rd, Miguel went to the strip club where his ex-girlfriend worked. He was asked to leave by the establishment for discouraging patrons from tipping her. He left without incident and was last seen on CCTV talking to a white man in the parking lot outside. This was the last time he was ever seen. There doesn't appear to have been much more information gathered since that day. The ex-girlfriend was cleared of any involvement and has been cooperative with police. Investigators believe it may have been something that happened back home that caused Miguel's disappearance. According to someone claiming to have known Miguel, there were rumors that he robbed a Jamaican man while in Massachusetts, and may have obtained a cell phone from it. He also used illegal substances, but this didn't seem to get in the way of him being a good family man. Miguel is described as a Hispanic man with black hair and brown eyes. He has tattoos on his right hand, left arm, and back, and is 5'11" and weighed 170 pounds at the time of his disappearance. Portland police are investigating the case and can be contacted at 207-874-8524. The disappearance of Stephen Clark is one of the strangest missing person cases. Put simply, almost 20 years ago, he walked into a public bathroom and never came out. Stephen was 23 years old in December of 1992. He was physically disabled after a road traffic accident when he was a child, but did well at school and during apprenticeships. On December 28, 1992, his father went to a local football match. Stephen wanted to attend too, but didn't want to buy his own ticket, so he instead went for a walk. He and his parents lived in the UK near the beach, and that afternoon he and his mother Doris went for a walk along the beach. They reached Saltburn about 45 minutes away at 3 p.m. Stephen needed to use the bathroom and they visited the public toilets on a pier on the promenade. Stephen went inside before Doris decided she would also use the bathroom while they were still there. When Doris came back out of the women's restroom, there was no sign of Stephen. She assumed that he was still inside. After waiting a while, Doris figured Stephen must have started the walk home without her, but there was nobody home when she arrived, and she realized Stephen had gone missing. Despite extensive searches of the beach around Saltburn, no clues as to what happened to Stephen have turned up. In the years since, there have been sightings, though it's not known how many were credible. One woman claimed to have seen Stephen outside his home at the time he was supposed to be in Saltburn, adding weight to the theory that Doris and Stephen's father weren't telling the whole truth. An anonymous letter was sent to the police years later, claiming Stephen's parents took his life. In 2020, they were both arrested and thoroughly investigated before being cleared of any involvement. It seems likely the sighting outside of his home was incorrect. There were people on the beach that day, including 2 men with a young girl, who used the bathroom while Doris was waiting for Stephen. They took turns to wait with the girl while the others used the restroom. It's not clear if they were ever reached. Even though it seems likely whatever happened to Stephen happened while Doris was in the restroom, it's possible they may have bumped into him on the beach that day. This is such a perplexing case because there's no evidence, no motive, and no explanation for what happened. Given the relatively recent activity, there have been more appeals for information over the last couple of years. Stephen was 23 years old at the time of his disappearance. He walked with a significant limp and had nerve damage to his left arm. He had brown hair, and anyone with information on the case can contact Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Take a look at this picture. At first glance, it looks like a normal school hallway. However, this photo has a chilling paranormal backstory to it. This photograph was taken in October of 2017 at the Deer Park Christian Brothers School and was posted to the school's Facebook page with the caption, quote, "Closed for the weekend, hoping it will be paranormal free." This caption appears to be related to the upcoming Halloween celebrations. However, there is a much darker story behind this photo. On October 2nd, 2017, the school uploaded this video to YouTube, and the video instantly went viral. As of 2022, the video has over 20 million views, and the mystery behind the video has still not been solved. This footage was taken during the night when students and staff were at home, but that doesn't mean that the building was completely empty. All of a sudden, doors began to slam and lockers shake, with the ghost opening locker doors and making their presence known. The ghost also kicks and throws a wet floor sign before the paranormal activity stops, and the ghost moves on. This wasn't the only paranormal incident at the school, and just days later, the apparition would show itself again. In the second incident, a loud crash is heard before the ghost makes its way to the hallway. A chair moves across the floor, and items are thrown around before the creepy footage ends. This footage propelled the school into the spotlight, and paranormal investigators planned on visiting the school to get to the bottom of the mystery themselves. Deputy Principal Aaron Wolf gave an interview, telling news outlets, quote, "The school is built on a site known as Green Gallows. In the 19th century, criminals met their end here. We found that out on Monday. People have suggested that we've used a green screen or edited someone out. I wish our school had these types of resources. Others have suggested that fishing line is used. I don't see how fishing line could open the locker because the locker doors don't stay closed unless the latch on it is turned." While paranormal investigators were excited to delve deeper into the case, there were also skeptics who accused the school of faking the footage. Snopes ran an article about the mysterious footage and deemed it fake. The school is known to hold large Halloween celebrations and encourages students to tap into their creative side. There was even a Halloween event held at the school which described it as the world's most haunted school. The school has strongly denied that this is a student project and insists that there really are angry ghosts roaming the halls of the school. The question is, who is the ghost and what does he want? In 2014, Australian woman Kim Davidson, along with her friend Jessie Liu, decided to take their children on a trip to Murphy's Hole in the Lockyer River in Queensland, Australia. The two believed that the day would be filled with laughter and good memories, but unfortunately, the group was left with something much darker. As the children splashed around in the water, Kim decided to take a photo to document their trip. The group thought little of this photo and carried on with their day. However, when Kim reviewed the photo, she discovered a ghostly figure huddled up between them. If you take a closer look at the photo, you can see a very pale apparition with dark eyes lurking behind the group. Kim told the Daily Mail, quote, "At the time of taking this photo, there was nothing between us. I'm holding the little girl, and the white head next to me with horns is not human, I can promise you that. Its fingers are on my shoulder and my daughter's arm. They're long skeletal type fingers." After looking at the photo, the group slowly realized that something had not been quite right in the water that day. Kim told the Daily Mail that her daughter had been grabbed by the leg several times while in the water, and that she had felt a presence around her but had shrugged it off at the time. The photograph was then shared on the Toowoomba Ghost Chasers Facebook page, where it went viral. Paranormal investigators flooded to the page, and one person even inverted the photograph, writing, quote, "Light flare will always show up as black shadowing when the photo is inverted, and in this case, the light flare is coming from full sunlight reflecting off the water onto the child." They had no doubts that the photo was real, and began digging further into the waterhole's history. The mystery deepened when it was discovered that in 1915, Doreen O'Sullivan had lost her life while swimming in the very same waters. Is this ghostly apparition the ghost of Doreen Sullivan, trying to warn others of the danger of the water? Or is there a more reasonable explanation for this photo? Paranormal investigators agree that the photo has not been altered, and firmly believe that Kim Davidson captured a photograph of the ghost of Doreen O'Sullivan. The Scotland Seminary in Scotland has long since been abandoned, but that doesn't mean that there aren't quite a few ghosts hanging around. In 2015, this creepy photo was taken showing a hooded figure standing at one of the windows. This photograph quickly went viral and people desperately tried to figure out who the ghost could be and how he ended up in the seminary forever. According to historical records, the seminary was built in the 18th century and was a safe haven for Catholic priests and other prominent religious figures. At the time, Scotland was moving away from Catholicism, and the new government wanted to ensure that Catholic priests were no more. Hordes of soldiers were sent through Scotland, traveling to the Highlands and remote areas to ensure that there were no priests left. In response, the Catholic Church built these places to house the priests whose lives were in danger and gave them a safe place to continue worshiping and practicing their religion. These seminaries were purposefully placed in remote areas to ensure their safety. The Scotland Seminary is nestled deep within the Scottish countryside and is only accessible by a rugged path. While this building is steeped in history and is an important part of Scotland's history, there are no records to confirm that anyone ever lost their life at the seminary, which only adds to the mystery of the identity of the ghost. The only person to pass away there was a man named John Patterson, and there's nothing to indicate that any battles took place in the Scotland Seminary. So who is this ghost? People have speculated that the ghost is of a monk or a religious person who once called the seminary home, but without historical records, we're left with a creepy paranormal mystery. The Ye Olde Man and Scythe, located in Bolton, Greater Manchester, is one of the UK's oldest pubs, and the first record of the pub's existence is from 1251. Over the years, the pub has been demolished and rebuilt, but while the exterior may have changed and updated, the spirits of the Ye Olde Man and Scythe have remained. The pub has played a pivotal role in the local history of Bolton, and in 1644, James Stanley, the 7th Earl of Derby, owned the pub and was responsible for one of the worst crimes that Bolton has ever seen. Stanley was angry that his family home had been attacked, and he retaliated, taking the lives of many men. His act would soon catch up with him, and he was said to have spent his last hours in the pub praying. If you venture down to the cellar, you may just encounter the ghost of James Stanley. But he isn't the only ghost you'll encounter if you sit down for a pint at the Ye Olde Man and Scythe. There are said to be around 50+ ghosts that haunt the pub, and in 2014, one of these ghosts was captured on camera. This photograph captures a dark figure lurking at the bar and slowly making his way through the building. Tony Dooley, who manages the pub, told the Manchester Evening News, quote, "I came down and saw a glass smashed on the floor, so I was instantly suspicious and went to check the CCTV, and I found it had stopped working. We checked the footage and it revealed this figure." This wasn't the first time that the pub had experienced paranormal activity, but this was the first time that the ghost was finally captured on camera. The flickering lights and bizarre movement of the ghost only add to the mystery. Some in Greater Manchester are skeptical and believe that the photo is nothing more than a publicity stunt to drive more customers to the pub. But others firmly believe that the Ye Olde Man and Scythe is haunted not just by one, but by many ghosts. The chair where James Stanley sat before he was captured is still in the pub, and people believe that his spirit is tied to the chair, making the pub his forever home in the afterlife. The Ollerton Hall pub, now known as the Pub in the Park, has stood since 1736, and the manor on the grounds is said to have been there since medieval times, bringing with it a whole host of ghosts and creepy activity. Each day, numerous people flock to the pub for a relaxing drink, but many people don't realize that they are surrounded by the spirits of those who once called the building home. In 2014, the bar staff captured a ghostly orb on camera. The footage shows the bar when, all of a sudden, a bright, mysterious orb floats around. The orb passes through before moving out of the frame of the camera, leaving bar staff mystified. The building is a Grade 2 listed building, meaning that nothing inside or outside can be changed without the council's permission, and the structure and architecture have likely been the same for many centuries. This wasn't the first time that the pub experienced paranormal activity, and according to the manager, quote, "Ghost hunts here in the past have found some strange things like orbs and other supernatural activities, so who knows what's going on." With a rich and long history, it's easy to see why the pub is likely home to many spirits. The question remains, are these spirits of the people who lived and worked on the manor's grounds? Or are these ghosts the result of something much darker that happened there many years ago? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.